Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am super excited today because if any of you guys really know me, you know that I'm also an undercover nerd. So today I have a very special guest. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Nadine Duncan. I am the founder of the Traveling Black Women Network, but I'm also an educator and history teacher at that, or former history teacher, I should say. So today I have a super special guest that I am super excited about. I've been excited all week about this interview, and we are going to have an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the transatlantic slave trade and the shipwrecks that we don't often talk about, the stories that we don't often talk about. So we have a very special guest, Miss Tara Roberts, and she's going to come to us and talk a little bit about her 6-part series called Into the Depths, or In the Depths, where she talks about some of these forgotten stories that we don't really get to explore. So without further ado, I'm going to bring her on and we're going to start just chatting. Good evening. How are you?
Hi! It is
It's
so amazing to see you.
I know,
And to
right?
hear you. Hi, Nadine.
How are you?
I'm great.
It is so good to see another smiling face. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right in. Let's jump right on in.
Okay.
So let's get.
Okay, wait. Before
Okay.
we no, I have to say, like, I love what you're doing. I love that you have this network of cool traveling Black women. I am mad. Like, go us. 32,000 strong. I am not
Yes.
mad at all. This is awesome. So this is
Yes.
my honor and privilege to be here and to be chatting.
Oh, thank you. And it's an honor to have you. I'm just like, oh yeah, I want to hear this. All right. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So tell us a little bit about who you are and the podcast, what you're doing, what you're working on.
Sure. So my name again is Tara Roberts, and I am a National Geographic explorer and storyteller. And so I have this podcast that actually launches tomorrow. It's called Into the Depths, and it is a 6-part narrative series that follows my journey as I hang out and dive with a group of Black scuba divers who are traveling around the world searching for and helping to document slave shipwrecks. So the podcast tells stories about the ships, it tells stories about the people who were lost on those ships, and it tells stories about the divers and the communities that are involved with raising those stories up from the depths. So that's what it is, y'all.
Love it. Love it. And I just feel like there is so much to diaspora and just there's so many different aspects of it that tell a story on its own, right? Like there's just, especially when you start traveling, there's just all these little pockets of information that we just don't know about, right? You don't know about till you experience it or until somebody actually does the research to let you know, like, hey, this is what exists in this area of the world.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what inspired you to commit to this particular chapter of our collective story.
Yeah, that's a great, great question. So all of this started for me because I saw a picture of a group of Black women. Well, they were Black women in wetsuits on a boat in the National Museum of African American History and Culture. I don't know if you have gone to, I call it the Blacksonian. I don't know if y'all have gone to the Blacksonian, but it is an incredible place, number one, and it's full of history and amazing stories. And there's this tiny floor, it's the second floor. When you're up on the ground level, the second floor has only about, I don't know, 3 or 4 exhibits on it. And it's like an archival floor. So people go there to do research. But on it, again, it was this picture of Black women on a boat in scuba in wetsuits. And I already was like, what? Who are these Black women? And there was such joy and I don't know, freedom and beauty to me when I saw them. And they were a range of ages. It looked like people were as young as they were teenagers, all the way up to maybe like their 50s or 60s. There's this broad range of women. And I was like, who are they and what are they doing? And I look at the placard that gives you information about the picture, And it says that they are a part of this group called Diving with a Purpose. And what they did was search for and help document slave shipwrecks around the world. So when I saw that picture, I was one, like immediately blown away by this mission. And then I was blown away because they look like me. And I immediately knew that I wanted to be a part of this. And so then I started to do a bit of research to understand, what is this work? What are they doing? And I learned a couple of things. So I'll share the stats with you that I learned.
Okay.
So first, I learned that there were 12,000 ships that brought 12.5 million Africans to the Americas. 12,000 ships brought 12.5 million Africans to the Americas. And they think that as many as 1,000 of those ships wrecked. So got 1,000 ships that might have wrecked. But less than 10 of those ships have been found and properly documented. And that to me did not seem right. And so these people who had devoted time and energy and were passionate about helping to raise that history from the ocean floor just felt powerful to me and made me want to be a part of it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And you don't even think about, like, 1,000 is no small number, right? 12,000 is no small number to begin with, but 1,000 is no small number, right?
Yeah. And okay, let me add this, because there's the other part that, like, the other number that completely blew me away. And if you knew this number, or if anybody who's tuning in knew this number, but I found out that 1.8 million Africans died in the crossing from Africa to the Americas. So again, we're not talking about 5 people. We're not talking about 100 people. We're not talking about 1,000 people.
Right.
1.8 million people. And those people have not been mourned. They haven't been grieved. Where's the memorial? It's 1.8 million people lost their lives. They say that the Atlantic is one of the most turbulent oceans around. And they say that's because it's full of these lost souls whose stories have never been told. So part of the work that I wanted to do, like, one, I trained as a scuba diver so that I would know what this work is and I could participate in it. But I also wear the hat of storyteller. And I wanted to help represent for these divers and represent for the ancestors whose voices have never been heard. I wanted to raise their stories to the surface and bring them back into collective memory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that, because it's all about what's actually in our awareness, right? And even now, in having this whole story about what is critical race theory and what are we teaching in the schools and all these different kind of things, it's just like, even here as adults, no matter how much we learn, there's still so much more to be learned. So many more stories to be told.
So many. Yes.
Yeah.
And there's such a way that we interact with the Middle Passage and with the global slave trade as if it was a footnote in history. Like, it's this tiny story to be told. But the truth is, the Middle Passage, the global slave trade were monumental events that changed the course of the world. It is not a Black people's story. It's an everybody's story. You've got Europe, you have Africa, you have North America, you have South America. 4 continents were involved in this trade for over 400 years. So to pretend like what exists today didn't come from that past is just, it's insane.
Right. Absolutely.
So be told about it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like, the conversations that you see today, you would think like this was something that happened over like a 20-minute period. And it's just like, no. No. This is deeper and wider and broader than that. You know what I mean?
Here's the truth is, religions were transferred, cultures were transferred, beliefs were transferred over those 400 years. When you take 12.5 million people from one place to another place, you're
Mm-hmm.
changing the environment. Like you're changing coastlines as you build ports, you're changing the landscape with all of these new crops that were planted to bring about wealth in places that didn't
Right.
have those crops before. You think about the amount of wealth that was built off of the trade.
That's right.
Like there's so much to this. And
Yeah.
yeah, that like one group of people or one perspective on that story is everything.
Right.
It's crazy. So what these divers are doing is helping to bring another perspective to that story and helping they're looking at it from another angle, which is
Yeah.
so powerful.
It is super powerful. And like, just in thinking about how we go about digging up our stories and sharing them with the world, it's just like, even the act in itself, like a group of Black scuba divers is something to be like, wow, you know what I mean? Because even the concept, especially before travel really took off, and I think within the last 10 years is probably when it took off, but even before travel took off, we did a whole lot of that's for white people. Only white people do that. We did a whole lot of that. And then slowly but surely, as travel started to take off, we started to get into these different adventuristic types of things that allowed us to open our minds and say, oh, wait, this is not for one type of people. This is for us too. Like we can take a part of this. We can be a part of this. And I think in that, being able to now take that new type of approach to it and then add something as amazing as like, okay, now here's our purpose for why we do this.
Yeah.
To me, it's like, let's do it. Let's learn more about ourselves. Let's figure out where we came from, because the interruption of so many stories and so many bloodlines is powerful, and it's super powerful to know about. All right, so let me ask you this other question. How do you think some of these findings will like really help the way we all understand diaspora?
Yeah, that is a wonderful question. So let me answer it this way.
Okay.
I think two things.
Mm-hmm.
One, surprisingly, working with slave shipwrecks and finding these wrecks in the ocean has not been sad work for me. It's actually been work, surprisingly, that is full of healing. It's full of closure. There's a way when you're engaged in the actual material evidence of what happened and you're facing that tragedy, but you're facing it from a position of power because you're saying, I'm going to be the one that goes and helps and finds this history. I'm going to be the one that witnesses for those that didn't have voice. I'm going to be the one that helps tell this story and bring it back into memory. That's powerful.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the storytelling that happens typically for African Americans in particular, it centers inside of the pain and trauma and doesn't allow us to get outside of that. So a lot of times we're facing this history with a sense of shame, with a sense of sadness, with horror, with trauma. But I think there's something about this work and the people who are doing this work that is really sensitive, it's thoughtful, and it's coming from a place of like, let's do the work to heal this past. And that's really powerful. So that's one of the things that I think is available for the diaspora around this work. The other thing I think is possible, that is more than possible, but that is happening, it is that it is bringing truer stories to light. So for instance, there is this myth, and it is a myth. I think most of us think it's a fact, but it is a myth. Well, no, it is a myth that Black people don't swim.
Right.
That we don't like the water, that we're not connected to the water.
Right.
And that disconnection is because of the Middle Passage. So what I am finding as I interview historians, archaeologists, these divers, and there's one in particular, his name is Kevin Dawson, and he is a professor who studies Black aquatic culture. And Kevin has proven through many documents and lots of research that we come from a long legacy of Black aquatic culture. That in West Africa, not only were we expert swimmers, we were divers back in the 1400s and the 1500s. Like kings, the king of England actually brought over divers, Black African divers, to help salvage his ship. And that was not uncommon. Like, we were known for our expertise. We made canoes, we made our livings off of the water. There were all these miles and miles of waterways inside of West Africa. So we had this connection to the water. And I even discovered, like, this sort of blew my mind, Nadine. I discovered from Kevin that a number or part of the interest in enslaving people from West Africa was because they had these maritime aquatic skills. So they brought people over and enslaved them so that they could dive for pearls in the Americas, so that they could dive for ships. A lot of the plantation culture is off of coastlines. And if we remember, we talked about like the wealth of the slave trade.
Right.
So you've got a lot of money being transported back to Europe from the Americas, and a lot of ships wrecked. So they would have divers, African divers and enslaved divers, going down and excavating and salvaging these ships, because Europeans, they stopped swimming in the Middle Ages because of all of these issues.
Right.
But didn't. So we had this skill that they didn't have. So this idea that we don't have a connection to the water is actually not true.
Yeah.
The things that's been hidden about us. So I say this work is an opportunity to unearth our true stories, for us to connect to a much broader heritage than we might have ever known that we had.
I absolutely love that. Like that, like absolutely warms my heart, especially as a history teacher. Like I went scuba diving in Brazil for all of like maybe 15 minutes. I could not get my breathing right. It was like a Viator tour. It wasn't like a real situation. It was a Viator tour. So I got in there, could not get my breathing right, ended up getting lightheaded and threw up. But in the meantime, it was still a good experience, right? I did still go out there and try it. But I say that because, when we learn these things about ourselves, like there becomes more of a desire to try, more of a desire to go out there, less of that, what do you call it? Like narrow-minded thinking of what type of people or what culture or what race does what, and like you said, it really rounds out our story. It still doesn't complete it, but it rounds it out so much, because there has to be something that we're just not really aware of, that we don't pay attention to, that needs to be brought into our awareness by projects like this. So I love that. I absolutely love that, because a lot of times we do think that.
Yeah, I mean, that is the narrative of Black America, that it is this thing, and it is only this thing.
Right.
And so even like the idea of Black scuba divers, a group of Black scuba divers, is like, wait, what?
Right.
Because there's this very myopic and narrow view of who we are, but we are much, much bigger than we know.
I love that.
Work of groups like Diving with a Purpose, who are taking on finding our history, that remind us of who we really are, who we really can be.
I love that. I love that. Like that just disrupts the narrative completely. And that is the goal, right? That is the goal. Like, we got to keep disrupting the narrative at every single angle, and I love that this is the chapter that you're digging into and that you're unfolding, and, you're hooking up with Diving with a Purpose, and then telling the story, making sure people are hearing it, because I feel like we are all in some ways tasked to take some part of the story and make something happen. Like, I personally feel like as an educator, I am tasked to be like, travel, education, boom, put it together, make sure people get out of America and see the rest of the world. Do whatever you can to make it happen. you know, and I feel like there's many of us in this space that are doing that for our community, like really going through and disrupting the narrative. But it can't just be one area. It can't just be one narrow focus. It has to be all of us finding all of these different stories that just have gotten buried or whatever the case may be, and just putting it out there. So I love that. I love that.
What you said, like each of us taking a piece of the pie and doing.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
We've
That's
got to.
yes,
We have to. Like I feel
yes,
like that is the charge, right? That is
yes,
the charge. When you find something you're
yes,
passionate about, like, all right, guys, come on, let me show you what this is. You
yes,
know, like all of us doing that is just like,
yes,
oh, okay, let me go over here now and see what that is. You know,
yes,
like that's the
yes,
charge, I feel like,
yes,
you know?
yes. And what's amazing, so I just add this one thing,
Uh-huh.
groups that are surfacing to do this work. Like we've been talking about Diving with a Purpose, which is a group of scuba divers who are primarily um, ordinary people who are just passionate about this work. But Diving with a Purpose connected with a group that I'd never heard of called the Society of Black Archaeologists. So there's a society of Black archaeologists, people who say that finding the material history is
Yes.
important for us as
Yeah.
scientists, Black folks, to really be involved in unearthing that history. So you
Yeah.
got these groups that are standing up and saying, yeah, no, I raise my hand. I'm going to be a part of that. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I love that. I love that. Oh my goodness. All right. So when we think about the podcast, like what are three concepts that you think the listeners can really walk away with after listening to the series?
Mm.
And maybe not just three, you know, whatever you see like people really taking away and walking away, especially those of us who aren't divers, but who love a good story, right? Who love
Yeah.
history, who want to know more. You know,
Yeah.
what can we take away from it?
Yeah. Well, I would say two main things that we've already kind of talked about is just to know this history.
Right.
Again, it's, 12,000 ships, 1.8 million Africans
Mm-hmm.
who
Yeah.
perished Middle Passage. Like, I don't think that that is information that most
Right.
people. So
Right.
I hope that people hear that and take that away.
Mm-hmm.
I also hope that people ask questions. Like, I hope that
Mm.
the series is thought provoking and that it makes you think about some of the things that you might not have thought before. I mean, three of the questions that I posed throughout, and I think that those answers to those questions are unfolding, and I think that they're
Mm-hmm.
different for different people. But one question is, why does this history matter? So I hope people
Mm.
are thinking about that.
Right.
Two, does it matter who tells this history? And if so, why? And then three, this is a more personal question that I've been wrestling with is how can searching for this history help me as a Black American woman feel
Mm.
like how can it help me feel a sense of home? So I hope that people are curious about those questions
Yeah.
and they're talking to each other to unearth answers around
Yeah.
that sense for them. That feels really powerful. The other thing that I want people to take away, and we spent a bit of time talking about this, is
Mm-hmm.
just this idea that the slave trade is not just a Black people story, and that the
Right.
Middle Passage is a monumental event in
Yeah.
our history.
Yeah.
The way that the world looked before the slave trade, and there was a way that it looked after. So for us
Yeah.
to stop pretending like this is a footnote in history feels really
Right.
great. And
Right.
I
Oh, I love that.
do this one last thing.
Yeah.
Interviewed over 100 people
Mm-hmm.
for this show. Like we traveled to Mozambique, South Africa, Senegal, Benin,
Yeah.
Togo, Costa Rica, St. Croix, um, Alabama, and Florida. There are over 40 voices inside of this, 40 voices that maybe you haven't heard before. It's again, it's historians, it's archaeologists, it's scuba divers. We have an amazing spoken word artist, which is something that is a little bit different. I think we tried to serve up this podcast in a way that feels like it honors our culture. So there's
Nice.
music in it, there is energy. I hope you feel like you're there. I hope we take you
Yeah.
somewhere, travel inside of it. And there are voices that are so smart, so thoughtful, really,
Mm.
really engaging with this history in ways that maybe most of us haven't.
Right.
So I hope that people really hear all of that and come away like, yeah, man,
Yeah.
incredible.
I love that. I love that. I mean, because we're such like rhythmic people, you know. When you put something together. Oh, someone just said healing energy. Absolutely. Oh, into the next podcast, right? So it's that healing energy, right? I feel like that's what it's all about. Like to listen to a story like that. And I remember you saying this earlier, the healing that comes from it, you know. And I remember even Bell Hooks saying that she found her healing in theory. So there's always this part of, as we learn more about who we are and the parts of us that have been hidden from ourselves, you know, there's some healing in that. And then adding just the way we vibe, you know, the music, the art, the culture, the poetry. I can't wait for that, because that I feel like is what really makes it like, okay, this is not just me reading through an encyclopedia, right?
No,
This is me like
no.
getting into an experience that my
Yes,
ancestors have, right? Like really being able to
yes,
imagine this thing and seeing
yes.
what it was like. So I love
We
that.
we have this she's a badass spoken word artist. Her name is Aaliyah Pierce. She's a National Geographic explorer. She's a
Nice.
word artist and she gives it, I think, in such a beautiful way. Also, I just want to note that we had a really diverse team working on
Mm-hmm.
the podcast. Um, and five of us were Black women.
Oh my,
So, yeah, like Carla Wills was our, oh, there's Carla. I see her. Carla
nice.
um, was our executive editor.
Mm-hmm.
So smart, so thoughtful. Like we couldn't have gotten where we got without her insights, her help. Bianca Martin was one of our producers. She's incredible. We've got Aaliyah Pierce as our spoken word artist. We have this incredible sound engineer, Alexis Adamora, who's out of London, who gave her slice of energy to this. You got me. So yeah, like we're trying to serve it up in a way that hopefully really speaks to us.
I love that. I love that. Like just getting out there and telling the story is just like that's what we have to do. I love that. And I mean we got to do it together, right? Because like
Yeah,
I can't be in a corner telling the story by myself, because who's gonna listen, right? Like we got to do it together. We got to pull each other up and do it collectively. So I love that.
yeah,
That's awesome. So
yeah.
what would you say would be, I guess, your maybe your personal or collective next steps after this podcast? So as you know, as time goes on, and you know, I'm sure we're not going to find all of them in 1 year, right? So this is going to be going on a project that's going to be ongoing. But what do you feel like your next steps are to really getting this story, this part of the story, out there for people to really hear?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think the first start is the podcast, which
Mm-hmm.
launches tomorrow. Let's go into the depths, and it'll be 6 episodes that run from now until March 3rd. So a new episode will drop every week on Thursdays, so people can check that out. Um, I've got a cover story on the March issue of National Geographic magazine that's coming out on February 7th.
Yay.
And that story was photographed by this incredible photographer. It's a Black photographer named Wayne Lawrence, who
Mm-hmm.
did portraits of the DWP divers. And there's some beautiful portraits where they're like, you know, standing stoically and powerfully in the water in their wetsuits.
Nice.
So people will be able to engage with the story there. And for me, you know, like there 1.8 million people were lost. As many as 1,000 ships are out there. There's so
Yeah.
many more stories to tell. So
Yeah.
I'm involved in this work for a long time, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm helping to unearth that. doing a lot more writing, a lot
Okay.
more writing. And I hope that DWP, Diving with a Purpose, goes out on many more missions. Like, it is not easy to find a slave shipwreck. That's why, well, there are a couple of reasons why so few have been found. I mean, part of it, they are super hard to find. Like,
Hmm.
these ships are not intact. It's not like you dive down and you're like, haha, there's a
There it
shipwreck.
is. Oh,
You know,
wow.
they were mainly built out of wood in the 1600s and 1700s. So when
Right.
they wreck in pieces. You know, they're pieces that are scattered across the ocean floor. So it
Wow.
takes a lot to be able to find them. You need the help of historians, archaeologists, and scuba divers working in concert. You need funding to be able to have all the equipment that you need to go out there and
Right.
search the ocean floor. And the ocean floor, like it's full of artifacts that are now encrusted in coral.
Hmm.
Marine life has made some of this home. The sand on the ocean floor has covered some of these artifacts. So
I
they're
would
not
imagine.
easy to see. You need time and space to be able to do the work. So, and I know that DWP has this dream of being able to take a mission from beginning to end,
Hmm.
um, to get more divers out there in the world who are participating in this work. Again, I do not come from a scientific background. Like, I did not go to school like some of the amazing colleagues and just brilliant folks who are inside of this work. I didn't get like, 10 extra years of study, but still I can participate in the work. And
Right.
so
Right.
can other people. Like any of us, well, I'd say you got to be somebody who actually likes to be in the water and likes to swim.
Right.
That there are opportunities to get trained to participate in this. This is not work that's over there for other people to do. This
Right.
is work for all of us to do. Like, I loved what you said. All of us have the responsibility. And you know what? Because responsibility sounds so heavy. Let's
Hmm.
say all of us have the opportunity
Okay. I like that.
this and to help
Yeah.
bring them up from the depths. So, next steps are supporting DWP and being
Mhm.
able to do more missions and being able to get this out and being able to train more people. DWP also, just FYI for everybody, it has a youth component. So, there's youth diving with a purpose. So, divers as young as 16 are
Oh,
out doing this work.
yeah.
So,
I love it.
yeah, like I hope it continues. This is like a lifetime of work. This isn't something that just ends, when the podcast ends. It's like
Exactly. Yeah.
it
Exactly. I'm
this.
right.
Yeah.
So I do have one last question.
Okay.
Of all the stories, or of all the, yeah, I guess we can say stories, of all the stories that you've been able to unearth and discuss and just kind of figure out, what can you share with us that maybe you'll share in a podcast, or, what can you share with us of something that that really warmed your heart, really moved you?
Okay, I'll share this.
Mm-hmm.
It is not a diving story, but
Okay.
it is something that really hit me.
Mm-hmm.
So as a part of this, I went to Benin, which is a country in West Africa. And there's no diving work that is happening in Benin at this time, even though I'm sure there are wrecks out there. But I went there because I wanted to witness what it was like, what the conditions were, what the experience was before people got on the ships. So I wanted to visit a door of no return, and I
Gotcha.
wanted to visit a barracoon. And
Mm-hmm.
barracoons are the enclosures where captive Africans were kept imprisoned until they were sold to Europeans to bring over to the Americas. So there's a slave trail that you can walk in Benin, and I really wanted to walk it. Um, and so I did that. And as a part of that slave trail, it turns out that there's this thing called the tree of forgetfulness. And so these captured Africans who were being sold into slavery would be made to walk around the tree of forgetfulness 7 times.
Mm.
7 times if you were a woman, 9 times if you were a man. And the purpose of that was for you to walk so that you could forget your culture, your identity, your heritage, and become a blank canvas for
Wow.
slave masters. So walking around that tree, walking that trail, standing on the beach in Benin, looking out and imagining like what those folks must have felt
Yeah.
before they were boarded on those ships. It really touched me.
Yeah.
And being able to bring that story again, like those
Yeah.
who were mothers, daughters, sons,
Right.
they were farmers, poets, dreamers, like they were people with lives and with identities. And
Right.
being able to just like hold space for
Mhm.
them and to say, I feel you, I see you,
Yeah.
I'm witnessing for you.
Yeah.
That was a really powerful moment for me.
Wow. I would imagine. Oh, I would imagine. So often we think about, we hear the story about, what has happened when they've landed in the Americas, the 1619 stories, but we don't always get an opportunity to really dig into the stories of what happened before
Yeah.
even getting on the ship. So
Yeah.
that is super powerful. Thank you for
That,
sharing
that,
that.
I think like that is the other thing that I hope people take away, especially
Mm-hmm.
African Americans listening to
Mm-hmm.
the show and reading the story. Our history and legendary diver Dr. Albert Jose Jones says this so well, but he says our history didn't start in slavery. It
Right.
started on the shores of the Americas.
Right.
It started all the way over there
Right. Right. Absolutely.
before. But what is amazing about the Middle Passage is that it is the bridge between now and then. It is a way for us to connect that journey and to have
Right.
access to what happened before. So it feels really important to me, for us to explore that in more
Yeah.
detail. And I hope people really get that when they listen.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Like when I taught Black History last year, that was the biggest thing to introduce. Is like this is not the starting point,
Yeah,
and it's kind of like we don't even realize how much we've normalized that to be the starting point of our history, but it's
exactly.
not, right?
Yes.
So
Doesn't,
yeah, I love that.
yeah, yeah.
I love that. I love that. Well, before we go, I want to open it up to any questions. Anyone watching have any questions that they want to ask or anything that they want to share? I saw a lot of stuff pop up, people just saying it was powerful and, adding so many things. If anyone has a question, we'll accept some questions right now. Hey, Weldon Wade in the water. I met him just yesterday. The cool part about this is being able
Hi.
to meet so many, like just the networking of it, being able to meet so many new people who are in this work and doing this thing. And it's just like,
Yeah.
just like I said, another chapter, another corner where you can see people like working on something that's like, oh yeah, I want to find out more about that. So I love that. Someone asked, where can I find the series? So I believe it's on all podcast platforms, correct?
It's on all podcast platforms. It's featured right now on Apple, but it's available everywhere. And again, it drops tomorrow. Actually, I think it drops at midnight at 12:01. So
Nice.
so anybody will be able to access it wherever you get your podcasts.
Yay. So 12:01, y'all, be ready. All right. Miss Carla E. Will says, as Smithsonian Director Lonnie Birch says in the podcast, there's a lot we don't know about slavery, and the last frontier, it went up, is under the water. That's right. That's right. There's so much that we already don't know, and this introduces just a whole nother, just opportunity to learn so much more.
Yeah. I saw somebody say name. So the name of the podcast is Into the Depths.
That's correct.
Yeah.
What issue of National Geographic is your cover story in?
Oh, that's Julia. Hi, Julia. I have not
Hey, Julia.
like 20 years. We used to work together a long time ago.
Oh.
Hi. It's in the March issue and it comes out digitally on February 7th and on newsstands on February 8th.
Nice.
And y'all, I don't know if I said this. This is so crazy, but like they put my picture on the cover of National Geographic magazine. So you have to check it out.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, we love Black women on the cover of everything. Yes. Oh, that's awesome. I can't wait.
Yes.
I
Yes.
cannot wait.
And it was taken again by Wayne Lawrence, who's this incredible Black portrait photographer. He not only shot me, but he shot a number of the DWP divers, and they are also in the magazine. You got Jay Hagler, who's a lead instructor and a DWP board member. You have Justin Dunavant, who's also, not only is he a co-founder of the Society of Black Archaeologists, but he's also a Nat Geo explorer. And you have his co-conspirator, Ayanna Flewellen, who is an incredible badass. So we have pictures of them. We have Kamal Siddiqui. Like, it's just incredible people that you can see who are involved in this work. It's really beautiful.
I can't wait. I think that's awesome. I think that's really awesome. Like anybody that knows how much I love history and storytelling and just like, just learning, just learning, period. That's really what it is. Just learning and recognizing that we just can never know enough, know? I love that. Black excellence all over the place. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel like it's more powerful than we think it is. You know what I mean? It has so much staying power with the next generation. What we leave behind, we're all charged every generation to do a little bit more. And this tells me we're doing it. We're doing what we can and we're continuing to.
We are doing it. It feels, maybe this sounds too optimistic or somewhat naive, but it feels like there's something different about this moment and that there is real opportunity to make lasting change.
I would
to
agree.
really like uplift voices that have not been uplifted before and to ensure that they are actually heard.
Yeah.
So it feels like a really powerful moment in time.
I would definitely agree with that. I love that. All right, y'all. Well, any other questions? I don't see any other questions popping up in the chat. Is there anything else that you want to share that you want just the viewers out here to know?
I would just say again that all of us have the opportunity to participate in finding history and bringing our stories back into light. And there's so much about us that has been hidden, that's been misaligned, that has been
altered.
What's the word? Yeah, like that has been altered, been destroyed. We all have the opportunity to participate in this. And I hope that one thing, again, that comes out of the podcast is that history is not something that is over there and it's for other people to write. That you have to wait for somebody to write a book, to read it, to then engage with history. There's such an opportunity to be a part of this work, to step into finding it and to helping tell the stories. And for all you scuba divers out there, diving with a purpose is one of those ways. Come join us.
I love it. Well, thank you so very much. I've enjoyed this conversation. Like, this has been amazing.
It's awesome to meet you.
It's awesome to meet you as well. Like, I've been like following your TED Talks. Like, oh, okay. Like, at first I was like, okay, Tara. Nope, because you're reading the name, so automatically I said Tara, and then I heard your TED Talk, and I was like, oh no, it's Tara. Let me make sure I say it right. So I'm so excited to finally meet you electronically or digitally, but nonetheless. So, and I'm so excited that we were able to have this conversation. So I cannot wait to like really just dig into this podcast. Like I know that I can be listening to it and moving around because that's what I do with my books on audiobooks anyway. So I am just, I'm excited. This is going to be great. It's gonna be great.
Oh, thank you. Really, thank you for having me. It's my honor, especially being part of a group that's about women who love travel. Like, yeah, that speaks to my heart so much. So it is my honor and privilege to know about this group and this work and to hang out with y'all for a little bit. So thank
Thank
you.
you. And it was my honor having you hang out with us for a little bit. Thank you so very much. Y'all have an amazing night, and you have a great night as well. I'll be tuning in. I'm probably putting stuff on your Instagram like, hey girl, I like this episode.
I hope so. Please
I
do.
will.
Please do that.
Well, you have an amazing night, and y'all have a great night as well.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Right.
Thank
Bye,
you.
y'all.